Before we begin this video, I'd like to thank my good friend Slifer99, or Count Chaos, for requesting me this matchup. I would like to say that whenever I make these versus videos, I'm not gonna take any characters, as those videos have already been covered by other YouTubers, and so I want to make my own kind of videos. Also, I'd like to say that all vehicles, ships, and more will be compared in their first stock stages. Also, if ships have hangars, the overall capacity will not be playing any significant part. It will be ship-on-ship combat only. But now that I've said that, and without further ado, let's begin. First, let's start with the general things and then keep the bigger aspects of the ships separate. The Venator-class Republic attack cruiser or Venator-class Star Destroyer carrier was a multi-role ship that was built by the Quad drive yards that formed the backbone of the fleet of the Galactic Republic in the twilight years of its time, serving from the beginning of the Clone Wars in 22 BBY until after the fall of the Galactic Empire in 4 ABY. It was still around, though rarely seen in the Legacy era that began in 37 ABY and ended in 139 ABY. Around the time where the Venator was built, it had a price tag of a stunning value of an estimated 59 million Republic credits. The Venator had a cargo capacity of 20,000 tons and enough consumables for 2 years of service without having to go to a spaceport to refill, along with a crew of 7,400 men and 2,000 passengers in the form of ground troops. The Venator is also capable of landing on a planet's surface, as seen in Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith on Kashyyyk. The Providence class had a crew of only 600, most of which were droids, since the ships were nearly droids in themselves, just like most CIS ships at the time. Otherwise, it had space for 48,247 passengers and up to 1.5 million deactivated droids in its belly. Along with that, it had a carrying capacity of 50,000 tons and 4 years worth of consumables. The Providence class could actually be called kind of predecessor for the later versions of huge Mon Calamari starships of the MC-80 line, that to use the correct term, Alliance to Restore the Republic used as their capital ships during the Battle of Endor in 4 ABY. The Providence was capable of landing on water, although it isn't clear if it was capable of landing on the ground as well. But since it could land in the water, I am highly confident that it could on a planet's surface as well. The Providence class was also made of so many modular components that made even people of no mechanical skill whatsoever able to upgrade the ship. So a great amount of plus points there. The Providence class carrier destroyer was equally a multi-role ship that entered service in 22 BBY. It was built by the Free DAC Volunteers Engineering Corps and Pamand Docks. Although the original design was created at Rendili Star Drive, but the very first plans and drawings were made on the planet of Mon Calamari, or DAC, as it was named by the natives. The ship remained in service for the CIS throughout the Clone Wars and was still in service when the Republic was reorganized into the Galactic Empire. And, as rogue forces from the droid army were still active, a few Providence-class ships were still being used, but around the time of the Rebel Alliance and at the Battle of Yavin, a Providence-class was a really rare sight. The insane price tag of a Providence was enough to buy 2 Venators plus a little extra, at the incredible amount of 125 million Republic credits. When it comes to the price tag, the Venator clearly has the advantage, as you can get 2 Venators for the price of 1 Providence, but apart from that, the Providence outclasses the Venator in nearly every other aspect apart from a longer service life. The Venator wasn't as easily upgraded as the Providence, and so it would be of greater cost and take much more time. Both ships were equipped with life support systems, so they would cancel each other out. But because the Providence is over twice as expensive as the Venator, and two Venators would have a carrying capacity of 40,000 tons and 4 years worth of consumables, compared to 4 years worth of consumables for the Providence and 50,000 tons in carrying capacity. Then I'd have to give the edge to the Venator in this regard. And with both ships having a hypermatter annihilation reactor, that really doesn't give any form of advantage over the others, since we don't know how much power they both crank out. So, in all terms, in all general aspects, I would give the Venator the edge.
Hey, 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 human! Don't forget me!
Now I'll compare the ships in terms of speed and maneuvering. The Venator-class Star Destroyer was in its stock formation 1,137 meters, 3,730 feet long, 548 meters, 1,502 feet wide, and 268 meters, 879 feet tall or deep. It had a maximum acceleration of 3000 g and a maximum atmospheric speed of 975 kilometers an hour, that is 605 miles per hour, and was one of the fastest ships in the galaxy, even vastly superior to the Corellian blockade runners, who were otherwise renowned for being faster than most other ships, hence their names. The blockade runners were only capable of reaching about 70% of the speed of a Venator, that is, 2100 G, also as seen in the Clone Wars 3D animated series. The Venators were very maneuverable and very well capable of turning the entire massive ship 180 degrees in a matter of about 8 seconds. For a ship that size, that's a real accomplishment. The later Imperial-class Star Destroyers weren't at all that maneuverable, if you take a look at the chase of the Millennium Falcon around Empire Strikes Back, for example. So, in general, the Venators were very fast, very maneuverable, and very capable of traveling the entire galaxy in a matter of hours. The Venator had a Class 1.0 hyperdrive and a backup Class 15 hyperdrive. This gave the Venators an effective range of about 60,000 light years. The Venator had 8 engine thrusters, 4 on each side, 2 primary drive thrusters, 1 secondary drive engine thruster, and then a tiny tertiary drive engine, the last of which I have no idea what is, and I'm not sure I pronounced it correctly. The Providence class cruiser was 1,088 meters long, that is 3,569 feet, and it was 198 meters wide, which is 649 feet, and it was 374 meters tall deep, which is 1,227. The Providence had a maximum acceleration of 2,500 g, that is 5 out of 6 compared to the Venator, saying 5 times 5 being 25, 5 times 6 being 30, just to state an example. Maximum acceleration in atmosphere was 1,050 kilometers an hour, which is 652 miles per hour, so it's a 75 kilometers an hour difference, and 75 kilometers an hour faster than the Venator in the atmosphere. Not much more, but still a little edge there. Unlike the Venator, it is stated exactly what kind of engines that the Providence has. It had 3 Creveled 4 radial ion drives. That means that it was also capable of outrunning or catching a blockade runner by being superior to the blockade runner with 400 Gs. We can assume that since the Providence class is a little faster in the atmosphere, it's a little slower when it comes to turning compared to the Venator, as we can compare this to normal ships in real life, whereas if a ship slows down a little bit, it becomes a little bit more maneuverable, and so it's capable of turning much faster. I think it's safe to say that the Providence is still more maneuverable than the Imperial-class Star Destroyers, as I also mentioned when I was talking about the Venator. Providence class also had a Category 1.5 hyperdrive and a Class 10 backup. In overall terms of speed and maneuverability, it is pretty clear that the Venator has the edge over the Providence. The Providence is only faster in the atmosphere, which of course does have something to say about the matter, but that compared to all the other things where the Venator is better in these specific terms is simply not enough to turn the tide into the favor of the Providence. So in this category, the Venator wins a comfortable edge. Now to compare their weapons, armor, shielding, and fighter capacity. The Venators were equipped with some pretty heavy guns, though it didn't have many of them. Its main armament were the DBY 827 heavy dual turbo laser turrets, 4 on each side, and though they were few, they were incredibly strong. Those DBY 827 turrets had 2 tracking modes and could hit a target up to 10 light minutes away. Also, even though those turrets were so huge and powerful, they could do a full 360-degree turn in 3 seconds. Those turrets alone were enough to rival the full firepower of that of an Imperial Class 1 Star Destroyer. The main weapons had 7 power settings that enabled the gunners everything from small strikes to completely and utterly vaporizing the enemy. With this in mind, a few Venators could, almost with ease, take down the shields of a CIS Lucrehulk-class battle station. The heaviest ships in the CIS fleet apart from the Malevolence. Also, it had 2 medium dual turbo laser cannons, again one on each side. You actually see one of them active in the Clone Wars movie, where it shoots at Anakin and Ahsoka in the Twilight. To deal with the fighters and bombers coming in too close, it had 52 point defense laser cannons that were controlled by a targeting computer, and they were very accurate. In general, the weapons of the Venator were incredibly accurate and incredibly strong. It also had 6 tractor beam projectors and 4 heavy torpedo tubes with 16 torpedoes in each barrel. As far as I know, the torpedo barrels were mounted in the far front and nose of the ship, and when it came to the fighter complement, the Venator no doubt had a lot to boast with. It either had 192 Alpha 3 Nimbus V-Wing class starfighters, the predecessor of all future TIE models, or earlier in the Clone Wars, it had the same amount of V-19 Torrent starfighters, as well as 36 ARC 170 heavy starfighters and another 192 ETA-2 Actis interceptors. It also had 40 LAAT-I gunships, also known as Republic gunships for infantry, 24 military walkers, usually the ATTEs, that normally carry 2 ATRTs inside of them. Also, it had various shuttles and 1 fabricated garrison base. All in all, a Venator carried 420 fighters inside of its belly. Compare that to the normal Star Destroyer of the Imperial class, which only housed 72 fighters, 6 squadrons of 12 fighters in each, to be precise. Venators also had a shield generator, though it is unknown how strong those shields actually were, but it is mentioned that they were roughly capable to that of the later Victory Class 1 Star Destroyers. The hull of the Venator was also made of simple but very strong and hardened durasteel. Now, the Providence definitely had its own arsenal of weapons to boast with, although none of the weapons individually were as powerful as the main guns of the Venators. Then unlike the Venators, the Providence was stacked from head to toe, or top to bottom if you will, with as many weapons as it could possibly carry. You can kind of compare this to the Tiger tanks and Sherman tanks of World War II. The Venators had a much harder punch with the main cannons, but the Providence had many more weapons to fight with that weren't quite as strong. If you're not too much into World War II history, then I can tell you that the Venator in this case would be the Tiger, where there were fewer weapons, but each were much more powerful. The Providence had many more weapons, but were weaker individually, representing the Sherman tanks. Now, back to the ships. The Providence had 14 quad turbo lasers, not heavy ones, 34 dual laser cannons, 2 heavy ion cannons, 12 point defense systems, and 108 proton torpedo tubes, and 8 tractor beam projectors. And to help it with more firepower, it had full carrying capacity of 120 Tridroid fighters, 120 multi-droids, 160 multi-troop transports, 280 assorted droid armored vehicles, and 8 landing crafts. Also, remember what I said earlier in the video. In addition to everything I just mentioned, it had 1.5 million deactivated battle droids if need be. And let me say it like this. The Providence may not have the same powerful single weapons, but due to the fact that it has so many of them, that more makes up for it. Having a few but much more powerful weapons could be considered a flaw, but so it arguably could be considered a flaw having many weapons that just aren't as powerful. The reactor core in the belly of the beast was powerful enough to make even the point defense cannons, which are normally designed for anti-fighter purposes, capable to fire shots that would rival the devastation caused by a 4.8 megaton bomb. And if even the weakest guns had that capability, then I wouldn't dare to think about the power that was behind a single blast from the quad turbo lasers. So even though it didn't have the same but very powerful guns, then it still had much more guns to make up for it. The Providence was literally covered in guns all around, and where there wasn't a gun popping out from the hull, there was some really seriously heavy and hardened armor. Also made with Durasteel, as most ships in the galaxy by that time. This one is insanely difficult to call out. The Venator had much fewer but much more powerful guns, maybe except for its point defense cannons, but otherwise the 8 DBY 827 heavy dual turbolaser turrets were clearly the heaviest guns in the group. Problem is, it only had 8 of them, and even losing one would take immense firepower away from the ship. And as those guns were so huge, they were also a really easy target to destroy, so I'd consider that a great flaw, unless the Venator can manage to keep its distance. But unless it goes into lightspeed, then it can't outrun the Providence either, and so the Venator will have to face the Providence. And I might as well add that no one engages in a battle at lightspeed. The guns of the Providence doesn't have the same power behind them as those of the Venator, but there were so many more of them. And so, for the Providence, losing one or two, it wouldn't be that much of a deal compared to the severe loss of the Venator. For me, it is pretty clear where this one goes. Because, think about, if you have something like 50 guns that aren't as powerful, maybe against 8 really powerful ones, then if you lose a few, then you won't really feel the difference. But the Venator loses 1/8 of its total fighting capacity. That's 12.5%. Think about this. Even though the Venator had the strongest main batteries, those same batteries also became its greatest weakness. Something that the Providence simply wouldn't have to deal with in the same way. Now remember, I may have examined and elaborated over how many fighters, troops, and more that both ships could carry, and I know I said in the beginning that they wouldn't matter in this video, but I still felt that these details were a bit too important to be left out. So please bear with me. But, in the armament category, the Providence class takes a very great leap ahead of the Venator, and thereby secures a well-deserved spot in the weapons, armor, shielding, and fighter capacity. Providence class gets the edge. And now it is time for the verdict. Both of these ships are incredibly powerful, and if used right, they're both utterly devastating. This is one of the hardest verdicts I've ever done. I know this is only my second versus video, but it will also be one of the most difficult verdicts to call in the entire Versus series that I will be doing. Also due to the fact that these ships are so much on par due to their pros and cons weighing them up and down. It would all depend on who would be the commanding officer of the ships. When it comes to the maximum acceleration, not in atmosphere, and maneuvering, the Venator gets the edge, and in general things that are good, the Venator clearly takes these points. But because of its very few, however very powerful guns, representing a huge weakness, if even one is destroyed, then I find it difficult for the Venator to actually win a battle here. Of course, we've all seen that one Venator going up against General Grievous' ship, the Invisible Hand, and that ship was even heavily modified. But remember now, that Grievous' ship was already severely damaged from the battle before the movie started. And the crews of the Invisible Hand didn't really go for the weak spots on the Venator, which in other words would have been the optimal tactic. Though all of that had something to do with the plot and so on in Revenge of the Sith, and just getting an awesome battle out of showing their CGI skills. In the end, the Venator can't keep its distance forever, as the Providence in atmosphere is faster and can catch up to and even outrun the Venator. Also, the Venator may be getting enough hits on the Providence to damage it, but I find that somewhat unlikely to be honest. And even though the Providence may be slower with light speed, and possibly less maneuverable, then it still has a small chance to be outflanked by the Venator. However, that seems unlikely as well. And considering that the Providence has so many more guns, losing a few won't be that much of an issue. So in the end, who would win? Most people would probably say the Venator because of the movie, but after a closer look, I must admit that I find it a little more likely that the Providence would win this. I would argue that also part of the reason why it would win would also be because of the easy upgrades to the ship, thus making it even stronger. And so, after a very, very hard-fought battle, I would have to declare the Providence the battered, bruised, broken, and nearly destroyed victor. Now, of course, this is all just my opinion, due to what I know and due to what I discovered through my research in the making of this video. If you don't agree with me, of course, that's all fine. I would love to have a discussion about the subject with you all. Now, I am aware that pictures of General Grievous' ship were heavily featured in this video, and his ship was also heavily upgraded. But remember that it was best referenced in the movies, and so that's from where I got the majority of the pictures. Now, I think I've been talking long enough. If you found this video enjoyable, please leave a thumbs up and share the living hell of a smelly bata puto out of this video. This is Chris, Lord Cirque, saying goodbye, good night, whatever suits you best in your time zone. Anyway, take care, and may the Force be with you. Always.